I'll just sit in here and watch today.
I want to get coffee. Nobody's on those yet. Okay. The recording is on. I'm always like, watch what you say, people. I have recorded.
I know. Yeah, it's so bad.
Yeah. I was like, I don't think that you can tell who it is. Is that for real, Shelly? You don't have to unmute if you don't want to. Let me see how to. We'll do it like this. Good morning. So far, it's just me, Shelly, and Rhonda, so I'm going to give it another minute or two before I start. I am on Tactic 7, price ahead of the market, seller pricing strategies. And if I always just tell you guys that my coach told me that the tactic number 4 and tactic number 9 are like the ones that they pointed me to get me started on the material. And then now, just because I happen to be engaging in the material, I see it over and over and over. I saw one of the mastery calls that went on over the weekend that I watched referred to it again. So you'll see the shift material being more and more relevant as we move into this shift of the technology that we're going through. So I'm excited to, I guess, refresh this tactic number 7, pricing ahead of the market. I have some interesting kind of thoughts behind this one as I get started here. Shelly is saying good morning. I see her saying that. So I'm just going to take it as that the Zoom link works since Shelly is in here. Rhonda, you ready to go? Okay, I'm going to just get started. So on page 135, price ahead of the market, seller pricing strategies. Basically what he's going to talk about in this tactic is the market that you're in can be a buyer's market, a seller's market, or a neutral market. So this book is about a shift, and he originally wrote it when we were going into a buyer's market and had been in a seller's market, and he was seeing the downturn coming long before the last housing crisis happened. Well, now we're saying we're in a technology shift because we're in the fourth industrial revolution, which is artificial intelligence. And as this shift happens, the way that we run our businesses is going to shift and change. So your pricing strategies because of that will change. So we've been enjoying a really nice seller's market, especially in our area here in Conroe, since really, I would say we had a little bit of a shift during that last drought that we had in 2011. But as we've come out of that, I guess, how many years is that? 9 years or so of a seller's market. And still, if you guys will remember at team meetings when I was team leader, I would do those stats for you each meeting. And here's the deal. I learned this from another thing that I watched recently. If you'll take your stats each month when they're released and put them in some place that you keep that kind of thing. I'm talking about a hard copy, or I guess you could do electronic copy for yourself in a folder. And then when you are having these pricing strategies with your clients, you can really refer and see the market well in advance as it changes. If you didn't see that HAR released their 2019 numbers yesterday, so you guys should have got an email from that. So on page 135, as we get started, and he starts the chapter here, the moment the media declares a real estate shift, it's as if the market just got doused in a cold shower. The result is fearful buyers, pickier buyers, and eventually fewer buyers. The remaining few claim that if they can't get a good buy, then they'll just say goodbye for now. So the way to combat any of that is the interest rates. And we've had interest rates so low that it's not as much of a motivator as it can be and should be. We don't really expect rates to change with the election this year, but it's just good conversations to have, because what I think is the buyers are going to change because of the way technology is changing, and with the iBuyers and the instant offers, that part of the market is going to change buyer mentality and seller mentality. So as you start to have these conversations, this is where I think this is relevant. And so he'll talk about anytime the shift in the market changes, and the media will start to talk about it. And you already have it in other parts of the country. We just aren't really having it here in Houston. So you'll see that as people get interested, the big billboards get instant offers, then the sellers will start to realize that they might prefer to save time than money. And then now this will be a question to the buyers also. Can they save money in those systems? So he just talks about having if you were to see that a housing market is shifting before it starts, you can really watch and have conversations with your clients to price ahead of what is going to happen. So he goes down on 135, kind of towards the bottom. He's talking about Price is Right. And he says, instead of guessing there's no top, buyers will now predict there's no buyer. Where previously they were aggressively pushing prices forward, now they're going to equally aggressively try to pull them back. And what I'll say about this is it can depend in each area and in each neighborhood. So it's a conversation that you could have that, yes, it's a seller's market, yet in this neighborhood, it's a buyer's market, and here's why. And it has to do with days on market, and it has to do with your actives versus your pending and your sold. So it's just talking about in every market, because there always is a market that you're in, the prices are either going up or going down. Rarely are they staying the same. And we just saw that they went up significantly in Houston in 2019. And also the fourth quarter was incredible. So we'd had that really weird first quarter. We had a kind of average summer and really a little bit less of an aggressive summer than we'd had in the years past. And then for some reason, the fourth quarter blew up. So that was interesting. So on page 136, in the bottom of this first paragraph, he says the motivated few are the ones you are looking for and the ones you can help. The shift exposes and magnifies the classic real estate price conflict that has always existed. And I love this part, the asking price a seller wants versus a price a buyer is willing to pay. So I always read the little side notes where the Jackie Ellis person says, we're in a race against time. The best price is the one you'll get now. If you wait, it will be lower. Now, this is not necessarily true in a seller's market. So you have to say, am I in a buyer's market or seller's market? For example, if I was in a brand new neighborhood, like say I'm in, I don't know, Grand Central or something like that, I could say this is probably a hot market and you can have higher prices. And especially in, say, that 200,000 range where there's multiple offers, a seller could essentially get more as prices go up. So you have that conversation of pricing it where the market is going. the bottom of this page, he says, in a seller's market, the power of pricing favors the seller and favors the seller, and buyers will compete for limited supply. That's what we've been going through in that lower price range here. A shift means the power is now in favor of the buyer, and the seller will compete to attract a limited supply of buyers. Our goal in representing a seller in a shift is use pricing to empower them as much as possible, and that's not easy. So I love this whole part of the window of opportunity. And if you guys would read this a couple of times and master this content, this would make or break a listing presentation to be able to really price your houses right by this content. I love this chapter. So he says, if someone's buying their home, sellers must be aware the window of opportunity. This phenomenon means when a home first comes on the market, it attracts attention from those agents who are currently working with motivated buyers, or those agents who are motivated by the price to go find one. So agents will watch the market, and if they see like a good house and a good deal, they'll go advertise it and find buyers even if they don't have one. Like I saw a couple of houses yesterday. I was dusting off my realtor skills and going to look at inventory, and I was like, oh my God, I found a couple of things that you'll see me marketing to see, because I think that there is a good price and a good location. So I circled this part. If any agent or their buyer believes a house is poorly priced, it loses its opportunity and does not draw their attention. Basically, it gets written off from the beginning. Once this happens, it's not easy to get those agents or buyers back, even with a series of price reductions or home improvements. So he says at the bottom of that chapter, when memories and opinions get us, they are typically tough to change. So it's talking about that first impression that a house makes. First time someone sees a property is called the window of opportunity. It's the single best chance to create the impression that will sell the house. It's the best marketing message a seller can send. We're priced right and serious to sell. So then he goes on page 138. I put little stars by this. Your job is to get them to grasp why pricing it right must happen right now. They only get one chance to make the good first impression. Making the wrong impression costs the seller time and money. He does Gary loves to do graphs. So you've got a graph here that just talks about what the price reducing effect and how much longer houses stay on the market instead of just pricing it correctly. So if you had some stats about this, this is a powerful conversation when they go, oh, let's just test the market. Let's just try it for a little while overpriced, right? Which is what they always say. Pricing houses for a successful sale is never as simple as someone might think. Continually changing market conditions and circumstances make pricing a skill as well as a science. Research, analysis, judgment that go into pricing strategies are not readily evident to most agents' listing presentations. I think that's very true if the agents even have a listing presentation, I'm just saying. And towards the bottom of this paragraph, he says the most successful agents become masters of pricing, masterful in getting their sellers to trust the findings and act on them. So he talks about buyers here. Buyers are always looking for value. On page 139, the shifts will just accentuate. I don't know what that noise is. Accentuate. It must be Claire coming in. The direction and speed at which a buyer thinks prices are going. So basically the buyer is contemplating, if I wait longer, would I get a better deal? Is this a really good deal now? What's the best deal I can get? That's what they always think. So if the market is shifting in any way or changing, they're then going to start to get, I'm not sure that I might not be missing something or could wait and get a better price. So people start to think, am I at the top or bottom of the market? And so what he says in the book, and I can't remember exactly where, Gary says it's like all things, the law of momentum. It will start to shift, and then when it does, it shifts quickly. Like you'll just be going along, and then you'll see it creeping to neutral, and then boom, it'll shift really quickly. So it does not sit around neutral for very long at all. I think that's just like one of the laws of the universe. So he says in this chapter, as an agent, you know this. So not only you advise your sellers on when their home will sell for, but also the general pricing of the market. You're making an observation and a forecast. The observation is the science and the forecast is the skill. So for you to forecast the future is the skill that agents don't have. They can just show you some comps. And then they expect the seller to think that that's like let's say I said your house worth $200,000 and we listed it. 6 months later, is it gonna be worth $200,000? I mean, here's the deal, guys. If it's going to sell right now for this, Where do I think the market is headed? Well, this is a skill of interpretation of studying the market. Sellers don't have time, and the buyers really don't, other than just what they, can catch on the internet. So they're able to predict market direction and speed. And he says it's available, but someone must put in the time and effort to uncover it, interpret it, learn from it, and use it. So the art of pricing persuasion, I think just persuasion in general, is a sales skill. A seller not only needs you to master the science of skill of pricing, but also the art of persuasion. And it's kind of true that people really want to not have to make the decision themselves. It's up to them to make the decision, but they really want to be persuaded one way or another that they're doing the right thing. So he says kind of down towards the bottom of this, the competent professional guidance to price their house and sell in a desired time frame. For sellers in the shift, the need for an agent who has mastered the science, skill, and the art of pricing becomes crucial. So on the next page, 140, the right comps make the analysis more accurate and a seller's acceptance more likely. What makes a property comparable? There are 4 main factors: location, size, amenities, condition, and you must factor in when it sold or went pending. You may also use properties currently on the market to get a sense of current competition. So I always think, let's just say that we've got like a really low day on market, but what time of year is it as well? So right now, I might be looking at the fourth quarter because of how busy that fourth quarter was, and then say, what if we have a slowdown? So even going to the quarters can be relevant. So he says kind of at the bottom of the next chapter, and you guys just yell at me if I get ahead of you, all motivated sellers must understand and their agent must persuade them about. In addition to the immediate value, sellers are also challenged to come to terms with another reality of the marketplace, the direction of speed at which it's moving. So he has just a nice graph there at the bottom of 140 that says the market is always like a seesaw. And this is true, for the stock market, for the economy, for jobbing. It's just always moving. It'll never stay the same. And so when you talk to a seller or a buyer about the market, I think this is great in buyer consultations as well, is to say, here's what the market's doing and where it's moving. So we find a house today, here's what's going to happen. If you go another 60 days, we may reevaluate, et cetera, to help them if the prices are changing in one way or another in that buyer's favor. And also interest rates, same thing. The direction which the market is going on page 141 is going to determine your pricing strategies. Properties that are appropriately priced for the market will always make the best impression. And so if you don't do that and don't make the best impression, the buyers just move on and oftentimes never look back. So he says, don't chase the market, let the market chase you. This is talking about when you strategically price ahead of the market, whether it's going up or down, the market will catch you. So let's say that you knew prices were going up. You could actually price a little bit ahead, higher price than you think it should be to sell now. Do you guys want to sell now or do you want to make the most money? Well, they say both. Well, you can't have both because the market is not going to stay the same. We can sell it now for this. If we wait, here's what the market is expected to do. You give them that analysis to help them decide what they want to do. So he says in the buyer's market, a seller's market, or a balanced market, price at the market, behind the market, or ahead of the market. He says in practice, only the buyer and seller markets are considered when choosing a price strategy. The reason a balanced market is taken off the table is the transition period between a buyer and seller's market is short-lived. Transition markets are usually fleeting. So you'll hear him say it's a seller's market or a buyer's market, but very rarely do you hear people talk about a neutral market. It just doesn't last long enough to talk about it. So I love to know what the rest of the country is doing because that's going to affect people moving in and moving out of the area. Now I got all blurry. There it goes. No. I really didn't do it. So still on page 142, I kind of starred this little thing on the left there. I help sellers see that they have to be smarter than other sellers. They have to be wicked competitors in pricing and essentially put other listings in their area out of business. So he just talks here about not chasing the market, pricing ahead of it. Sellers really first decide if they want to sell. So it's like, Mr. Seller, are you sure you want to sell? Are you ready to sell now? And as soon as a market price has been established, I'm here in the middle of the page there, the question every seller then has to answer is, what should my asking price be? So I'm determined I want to sell it. What should I ask? This is a strategic question, not a value question. So I love the fact that these are pricing strategies, because this is when you talk to your clients about getting strategic, and this is why we want to price it this way. And it's going to help them discover out of, what if I just overprice it? What if, we just test it? Those conversations, it's just that they're not thinking strategically yet. And so what a house is worth is the answer to the value question. What will a house sell for is the answer to the sales price question. They're different questions. When a seller's ready to sell, there's only one thing they want to know: what's the best price the house will sell for right now? When the sellers go to price their property, two things matter: where the market is now and the direction it's going. So it's really a lot about what the whole chapter is about. On page 143, then that little right-hand side, there's a gap between what a seller thinks and the realistic price they can get. That gap is where your skills go to work. So do you want to maximize the price, or do you want to maximize the price possible? This is where I already kind of said he's going to talk about if the market's going up or the market's going down. If you know the market's going down and days on market are going down and inventory is up, that is when list it yesterday, because you're heading towards them losing a lot of money if they hesitate, and way more important that they price accordingly as the days on inventory go up. So if you guys watch that every month, you can see it a long time in advance. And it says, when asked the question, literally every seller immediately says both, which means they have not understood your question. They don't understand. Now, if you're in a neutral market, I don't know if you're in that little period of time, and we're a little bit close to that right now. You guys could argue about pricing it a tiny bit higher. It's really having the conversation at the front end tells them, here's why we're thinking about it this way, and here's what I want you to know, and it educates them. So he says successful pricing means getting the maximum price now for a house. Getting maximum price doesn't necessarily mean getting the maximum price possible. Down towards the bottom of that same paragraph, if they're strategically making less money in return for a faster sale, a trade-off they may want to justify. If you guys think that the iBuyer programs and the instant offers and all of that is not going to take hold, here's the deal. They're finding from the research that the sellers are willing to pay more for the less hassle. People, if they have money, will spend it for convenience. This is a convenience society, especially the millennials, and really the whole society just is. And so would you rather take 10,000 more and cause it, take a lot more hassle and all those showings and all that stuff? Or would you take 10,000 less to not even ever have to get it ready for the market? There is a percentage of people who will say, I'll take the 10,000 less and let's go ride it. And that's just true, which is going to affect you guys' commissions. So down there at the bottom of this page, if they have the time, this could mean holding off from selling a while longer as the market prices raise. Another thing that you'll see on the multiple offers is pricing lower can work, because you're going to get multiple offers, which will raise the price. And it's always the market of the moment. If they're in a luxury price range, the people in the luxury price ranges, they know they're just going to expect to sit on the market. And so you have those conversations. You might tell them, hey, you might sit on the market a year. You might only have one showing every quarter. That's just the market that you're in. Even if you take 100,000 off or something, it may not affect it whatsoever. It's got to be such a good deal that most of the luxury clients aren't too concerned. Usually in a election year, the luxury market will watch that election, and any kind of war going on, all of that will affect that luxury market the most of all the markets. So he says on top of 144, if you fail the window of opportunity, then you become shocked. In other words, the seller runs the risk of simply being another overpriced listing on the market. A rising market can actually forgive a small overpricing on a highly desirable property, but never a big one, meaning never too big of an overprice. The market just does not forgive a way overpriced listing. And so many people make that big mistake. So I love these graphs in this book. You guys can get that content for your listing presentations. And so on bottom of 144, when prices are falling, sellers are in a bind. Pricing behind the market when they're rising means they could be leaving money on the table. So it's important as your fiduciary to have those conversations with them. If somebody says, I don't think I should list my house at Christmas, I should wait till spring. Well, the fourth quarter just proved that wrong. We had an amazing fourth quarter, and we could very well watch prices drop now. So only you can help interpret it with your skill, and then they've got to decide. So pricing behind the market when prices are falling means that the sellers just won't even sell. That's what happened with the downturn. They got so much inventory, sellers just couldn't even sell. In fact, what saved the economy, a couple of things happened is, number one, Obama did the $8,000 home buyer, first-time home buyer incentive to move the market because the buyers, there was so much inventory, the buyers just weren't buying. So he went ahead and got some buyers to buy using that incentive. And then the sellers basically just pulled gazillions amounts of inventory off the market. Otherwise, we would have probably still, like it was a big problem, all that inventory. So it's just talking in the bottom of 144 about what happens when prices are falling, and you guys will get into this market. So watching this ahead of time, being aware of it now, having this skill to interpret it, I think is so valuable. On page 145, it's just talking about everything is priced alike. The buyers get confused and the sellers still want too much, and it's a dilemma. Then they'll become fence sitters. And then when everything is priced the same, the buyers become uncertain about the value. The buyer is always wanting to get a good value, so then they get that fear of paying too much. So I think that's a great conversation for your buyer consultations. Yeah, guys, you're gonna have a fear of paying too much, and here's what the market's doing, and here's how we'll get around that. So it just talks about the seller and the buyer dilemmas during the market changes, and how to obviously get ahead of it if you're a seller, and then to understand it if you're a buyer. So on the last paragraph there of 145, all sellers naturally fear underselling their house, and rightfully so. However, in a shifting market, there is a greater risk in overpricing. I think there's always a risk in overpricing. On page 146, you got another little diagram there of chasing the market and of what's happening when prices. If you find yourself in a neighborhood that is pricing is dropping, these are just great tactics to use to help that seller get clear on what will happen. So it says on 146, middle of the page, we're in a race against time is what you tell every seller. The best price you'll get is the one you get now. If you wait, it will just be lower. Pricing at the market is really overpricing in a shift, and actually pricing is a too high of a risk to take. If the market is on its way up or on its way down, you should always price to the market you're headed to. So it could be if you're in a great market and you see really low inventory like we've been experiencing, you can price it, expect some days on market to happen, and by the time it catches itself, you'll have actually made more money. So I think this is really neat material on page 147. If you guys were to kind of go over here and analyze these graphs and pictures and bullet points, I love those. And I'm personally not as much of a visual learner as I am audio. That's just my learning style. So I kind of look at graphs like this. That's not I don't get all like hot and bothered by these, but your clients do, and lots of people do. So page 148, the challenge. Research supports the fact that sellers and buyers are typically out of sync with the realities of the market. Sellers tend to dwell in the future. I like this part. And buyers in the past. Sellers want to push prices up. Buyers want to hold the line. In a buyer's market, buyers want to place themselves in the future, and sellers want to dwell in the past. Buyers want to push the prices down, and sellers want to hold the line. So, and you're in that little tiny period of time in the neutral market. That's when you've got 5 or 6 months of inventory. Everybody's kind of just waiting to see how it's going to go. They're just really dwelling kind of in the state of the market where it is. You see prices going up or down, watch out, because it will really, the appraisers sometimes miss this in that they're pricing behind. The effective consultation about pricing can bridge a gap, but it's not easy. The challenge in a buyer's market is usually the anticipation that the market is dropping. This means it's up to you, the real estate agent, to pull the seller forward, not just where the market is today, but where it's likely to be in a few weeks or even months. Given this reality, sellers need to a knowledgeable agent more than ever. Specifically, they need a professional and brutally honest pricing advice. I feel like if you go on a listing presentation and you get real like this, that you're going to combat the agents who go on the listing presentation and just fluff up the price. You have a real conversation about the market and where it's headed. That seller is going to see that you're a professional. And if you just say, can I be brutally honest with you? I really want you to know. And you know, what if you were saying, hey, I think we could get more? Wouldn't they love to hear that conversation? So at the end, it's pay me now or pay me later proposition for both you and the seller. If you can't get them to face the realities, you may find yourself back with them in a few weeks explaining why the home hasn't shown, how much less sold, taking price reductions. For the seller, they'll risk chasing the market and netting far less than if they priced it strategically. On page 149, the most frustrating situation is when the seller lists their home behind the market, attracts an interesting buyer, makes a below list offer price, and the seller rejects it. You might have to remind the seller that they should treat every buyer as if it would be the only offer they will ever get. I put a star by that because I think that should go in the listing presentation. He goes into something here where he talks about the concept of the seller in essence buying back the house when they don't take an offer. But if you're in your listing consultation and you say, remember to take your first offer could be your only one, then they get that first offer and they're all emotional about it. You remind them that, remember when we talked about this. And too often sellers will not take that first one. They just reject it because they're emotional about it and then, kick themselves in the butt later. So if you have a nice story to tell them about that, would be a powerful thing to do that part of the listing presentation. And so he says over there on the right-hand side, in a real buyer's market, I really encourage a seller to take the first offer. You never know if you'll get another one. And it's also a little bit of a reality check on how intent they are on selling. And so he just talks about the buyback trap. It's a concept that you could use if you wanted to study that part about do not reject an offer. Do not reject your first offer, especially. The tale of two markets. So this part on page 150, I thought this was interesting. Gary says 80% of the homes are overpriced, 20% are well-priced. Well-priced properties getting multiple offers, the overpriced properties getting none. So when you think about the fact that 80% of the houses on the market aren't priced correctly, I kind of believe that. And the only way you can tell is the movement of the market when they're selling. If we've got such low inventory, why wouldn't every house be selling? We have the buyers for it. It's that there's still inventory of overpriced houses. So Gary says, I immediately realized in every market, every time there are two markets. The one where properties are priced to sell, and then the other where the properties are priced to sit. The seller is either in the market or out of it. So I love that. I think there's some scripts there. He tells a story here, and I kind of want to read this part because I liked it. So the agent says, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, just because the house is on the market does not mean it's in the market. In every market, there are actually two markets. They're the properties that are priced in well enough and in good enough condition to attract the interested buyers. And there are homes that are overpriced or less than ideal condition that won't attract the buyers and sellers. So if you look at this graph, and he shows them the graph and it explains to them you're either in or out of the market, I think that's a nice visual. So the seller says, I've seen the same thing on eBay. So you can say an example like that. Have you ever seen this happen on, you could give another example, and you see that something's so priced so high that you just don't even look at it, where something seems like a good deal, all of a sudden this bidding war happens. And so that's just a nice conversation about prices and comps and in the market, now the market, and we want to be in the market, not on the market. I love that material right there in that book. And on page 152, at the bottom of this one, he says, the very last sentence, as your agent, I cannot change market conditions. It's my job to show you how to get your house sold in the existing market conditions. Another graph on page 153. So the seller says, I think I get it. It just makes sense. I just wish I would have decided to sell earlier, like they can kick themselves if they missed a hot market. And the agent says, the truth is actually this could be, there is a good time to sell, even a solid financial opportunity. You may not be able to price the home as high as you could have last year, but if you don't sell now, you'll be getting less next year. The seller says, okay, so how do we do it? So the agent says, I prepared some research on the prices of other homes available in the area and neighborhoods like it, as well as some numbers that reflect what is or isn't selling. Put another way, what is and isn't in the market. So you can kind of take some and say, we got to throw these off. They're not even priced in the market. I previewed a lot of these homes, and we can decide together how best to price your house to sell. And I used to, in that horrible downturn, I used to sometimes take sellers with me to look at some other houses if I really had a seller who was rigid on pricing, and say, I tell you what, let's go look at your competition. Let's go look at a couple of houses, and then let's have the conversation again. And I could find that could work sometimes. Standing out from the competition on page 154. Remember, it's not about you, it's about the market. I like the that content on the left of 154. We do an absorption rate CMA rather than a comp sale. So I like having an absorption rate conversation with sellers and with buyers too. But I really think an absorption rate, this is just where the exact same thing is saying how many months is it taking for houses to sell if none came on the market. It's at the bottom of that stats where it says it's 4 to 5 months, 6 months, 3 months average. That helps you have that conversation, and they might not know what an absorption rate is, or they might. So to take or not take an overpriced listing, I love this content because Gary basically says there's no right or wrong answer. So they've interviewed so many agents that are highly successful millionaire agents who some say take them, some people don't, because you can get buyers from it. But every successful agent doesn't want to take overpriced listings. And most of them will say, I'd rather have way too many listings to have this problem that I could turn down a seller. So some will be adamant, I'm not taking an overpriced listing. And some will say, I'm going to put a sign in the yard and get some buyers from your house. And then we can just pray it sells since you're overpriced. So it's just your own experience. It says on the right-hand side of 155, a home has the most value the day it hits the market. So I like for them to understand that. Last material on page 156. So 7 maxims for pricing. Be a student of your market, know your numbers. I'll tell you that I'm guilty of this. We all get so busy. I think that KW Stats tool that I found is really lucky to have something be so quick for you, and then you can just use it. If you had just 12 months there, you can see way in advance what's happening, and then you get into the neighborhood itself. And so I think for your farms and for your niches, if you're not going out and looking at property, you notice that agents don't do it. I think it's ridiculous. So it says focus your main comps on actives. So don't just do your pendings and solds. I think having the actives conversation is very important if the market is changing. When you're in just a kind of a regular market, like right now, it's close to neutral. The actives aren't as important, but it certainly is important how much competition do you have, because you can suddenly have a whole bunch of actives come on and you didn't even really realize it. Being a student of property, previewing them so you understand what is selling and why, keeping your presentation as current as possible with your ongoing research, pre-qualify for motivation. Sellers who need to sell most often, price ahead of the market and avoid chasing it. Number 7, always secure price reductions in advance to avoid falling behind the market. So I absolutely love, and I think it might have been during the shift that I started doing that and say, here's what I price it today. And if we haven't sold, the National Association of Realtors, you guys probably have this script. If it's gone, it's had 10 showings and it has not got an offer, or it's gone more than 2 weeks without a showing, it's time for a reduction. I just tell them that up front. So it's either 10 days or 2 weeks. 10 showings or 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, we're going to have to talk about the price. And that's just going to happen. And even if it's a small drop, we're going to change it every 2 weeks until we sell, unless you just don't want to sell. So he talks about the price is right. Everyone loves to be a pricing expert, but very few are. The wisdom here is to be purposeful in your conversation with sellers, providing them the necessary data, engaging them in the process of pricing their house to sell. That's all I got. I got 5 minutes over, so I gotta head off. See y'all later.